What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. I'll be honest with all of you, this is the worst week we've had yet for the waiver wire. It's for sure the worst at running back. Maybe we can argue a different week was worse overall, but there's truly just not much available on free agency. So unless you're looking for maybe a quarterback, that's not too bad. Maybe a streaming defense, it's not looking great. We will still go over all the positions though, because there are actually some wide receivers I'm a little bit excited about. Start with the running back though. Where we can probably rip through a lot quicker than normal weeks because it is truly just handcuffs. Braylon Allen, Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Keaton Mitchell. Those are the guys that you'd probably look at the most. They are not players you can start this upcoming week, but they're players that at this point of the season could be immensely valuable if there is an injury. I think that's the order I like them in. Again, it completely comes down to injury. If James Conner got injured, of course, Trey Benson is going to move up ahead of Braylon Allen, Blake Corum. But I think this is the order I like them in because it kind of follows what I think the upside is if there is an injury. Very close between Braylon Allen and Blake Corum. If both of them, became the starting running backs, if there's an injury to Breece Hall or to Kyren Williams, I think they would just both be locked in running back ones. But again, that's, I think, the order I go after them in. After that, you can take shots on Isaac Urendo. You can take a shot on Khalil Herbert, but I wouldn't spend any fab. I wouldn't use a claim. I would only add those players. Urendo, they're on bye this week. It really just is like McCaffrey. Who knows, right? Truly, who knows if he's actually coming back this season? We're pretty sure he's trending towards after their bye, so week 10 or week 11. But we don't know for sure. He could always suffer a setback. And then Mason's been dealing with his injuries, but the thing is, he's got a bye to come back for that. Now, Urendo looks good. I think he's the locked-in 3. If the first 2 are injured, I think he'd be really, really good. But again, they're going on bye, and he's probably not going to do anything after the bye, but worth a dart throw maybe in a deeper format. And then Herbert, it would just be, you'd think Chicago would trade him away, right? Like, if you were the Bears, he's like a good player. He's a running back that I'm sure 7 or 8 teams out there would be like, yeah, we could use him in our rotation. I don't think he has that much upside unless he gets a really good landing spot. But if a team like the Dallas Cowboys wanted to go out and get an upgraded running back, Khalil Herbert would be the best running back on that team. So we could see a situation like that happen. You need a trade, but the trade deadline's next Tuesday. So like, it's not a long-term, let's see if he gets traded in like 5 weeks. It is within the next week that he would need to be traded for anything we talk about in potential trades in this video. So yeah, potential there. But if you're in like a 10-team league, you probably don't need to be stashing Khalil Herbert. But again, that's it. Again, very bad week at running back. At wide receiver, it's not much better. There are some decent options. Cedric Tillman, we went over him last week. Then he has 7 for 99 and 2 touchdowns. A big chunk of that production came on that long touchdown. I don't remember exactly how long it was, maybe like 45 or so yards. So, of course, the stat line looks a lot worse. Still great, but looks a little bit worse if he doesn't have that long touchdown. But also worth noting, there were multiple deep shots, right? Those weren't the only targets he had. There were, I can remember 2, there may have been 3 other very deep downfield targets that were not just like complete throwaways, that they were actually like off of his hands, like very, very close to other massive plays. So great role in this offense. Again, we talked about it last week. He basically fills in for what they were having Amari Cooper do. And when you transition over to Jameis Winston, you're going to get way more deep throws and way more accurate deep throws. So great role in the offense. Unfortunate is the remaining strength of schedule, which we'll go over when we talk about Winston. And the quarterbacks, it's not good. They have a very difficult schedule upcoming for wide receivers and quarterbacks. San Fran wide receivers, again, they're on bye in week 9, so don't add one of Jennings or Pearsall if you're like, I got to start in week 9. Well, they're not playing, so you can't do that. But we know that Brandon Ayuk is done for the season. Debo keeps getting banged up. I would imagine he's fine coming out of the bye, but he keeps getting injured. You all know how much I love Pearsall, right? The amount that I talked about him this offseason was insane. I still think, even again, how good I think of a prospect that he is and how good I think he's going to be long-term, I still think when they return from the bye for this next month or so, and potentially for the rest of the regular season and even into the playoffs, I do still think like Jawan was awesome. Jawan was really, really good before getting injured. I do still think he'll be ahead of Pearsall in that like target share and like those first read targets and who they're designing plays to. Now, there's still a chance that Pearsall develops quickly. He's the prospect that I think he is, that they thought he was, and he quickly passes Juwan Jennings. That could absolutely happen. So that's why you'd be, have appeal for Pearsall. In one of my leagues, I just added them both last week because again, we don't truly know which one is going to like have that breakout. I still think if you were sitting there on free agency and you had to pick one of them and like no one added either of them last week, I still think it's Jawan because again, he played really, really well and I just trust him a little bit more right now in their careers. But I wouldn't be willing to bet a lot on that take. And I'm honestly rooting to be wrong in that. I mean, Pearsall is by far my most roster player in all formats. I have him in Dynasty, one of my 2 redraft, 30-something% of my underdog teams. I love Pearsall. I still think if it's 50-50 between them, I would take Jawan. Michael Wilson, talked about him probably the past like 5 or 6 weeks, just being like, he's not going to be, a wide receiver 1. It's just not going to happen. He's not going to be a high-end wide receiver 2. He's probably not someone I ever will want to start at wide receiver 2 unless you had an injury to Marvin Harrison Jr. But he's someone that as we approach these bye weeks, as we have injuries, he's someone that I truly think you could use in the flex spot in a lot of weeks and be fine with it. Because again, the bye weeks are coming. It's only 2 this week, so it's not too bad. It is 4 teams on bye in week 10, 4 in week 11, 6 in week 12, and then another 6 in week 14. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of your players on bye in the upcoming weeks. Michael Wilson, just a good player to have over that time. Jalen McMillan, talked about him last week as well. Godwin done for the season. Evans likely out until week like 11 or 12, depending on his recovery. Shepard also got banged up this week. And I don't want to say he's a shell of himself because Shepard's still like better than a lot of people think, but he's not someone that they're going to feature down the stretch. He's not someone that's really going to command a high target share. McMillan had a really strong camp. He's a prospect that I was excited about. They're kind of misusing him right now in the offense. He should be the one overtaking the Godwin role. He should be in the slot. It was not the case this first week without Godwin. Maybe they notice that going forward. It just kind of depends on how they use him, if they use him properly. But I do think that he's like worth rostering in all formats. Those are the more locked in wide receivers. I'd say behind that, the names to consider are Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker on the Panthers. You've got Parker Washington on the Jaguars, and then Kayshon Boutte on the Patriots. Another trade situation. You have to think Deontay is traded away. Again, trade deadline is next Tuesday, so we're not sitting super long term on this. If Deontay is not traded away and you want to stash Jalen Coker, well, if Deontay is not traded away by next Tuesday, you could probably end up dropping him. So it's kind of a short-term thing to try and capitalize on that upside. I just don't see why the Panthers would not trade Deontay. Like, why would you keep him on the roster? You know you're not doing anything this season. You're 99% sure he's not going to sign with you long-term. Trade him away, tank a little bit, get something in return, because there are plenty of teams that would be willing to give something up for the opportunity to have Deontay Johnson into the playoffs. If that happens, Xavier Legette, I thought he was overrated as a prospect, but they spent the number 1 pick on him, or not the number 1 pick, a first-round pick on him. He's very athletic. He's someone that if Deontay was traded away, he would probably be the person they are trying to feature offensively in the passing game. Honestly, though, I would say Coker is the one that I'm like more excited about. He's also rookie, but he went undrafted largely because he went to Holy Cross, not exactly a high-end college program, but he was really good in college. He is the 6th most athletic wide receiver in this class, and we haven't gotten week 8 data yet. But if you watch the Panthers game, anytime you see Coker out there, you're like, this kid is separating better than anyone else on this offense. Through 7 weeks, he was their top separator. He did also have the lowest amount of routes that gained a negative separation score. So basically routes where you run the route and you're absolutely blanketed by the defender. Among all the wide receivers on the Panthers, he was the best at not allowing that to happen, to actually getting open on the vast majority of his routes. Still more of a deeper league name, 8, 10-team leagues. You just don't need to be looking at Jalen Coker, right? You don't need to unless you have like 12 bench spots. But as we start getting into 12-team leagues and especially expanding beyond that, I think he's good. Like, I actually think he's pretty good. And if Deontay's traded away and he gets a full snap share, he could be someone we're using down the stretch. Parker Washington, another player that, like, I don't think the vast majority of people think is any good, but I think he deserved more snaps regardless of injury, right? I think they just him getting him onto the field. I think at the expense of Gabe Davis, Parker Washington should have been playing over Gabe Davis. Now we have Christian Kirk done for the season. Brian Thomas Jr. getting MRI on his ribs. Like, I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be fine, so I don't think that's a situation where we're like, adding value to Parker Washington. But basically, Parker Washington is a slot wide receiver. So he's just going to move right in, just completely overtake the Christian Kirk role. I still think Christian Kirk is a better wide receiver than Parker Washington. But if you had Christian Kirk and you're like, no, like not another injury to my squad, I think you can add Parker Washington and just be like, okay, whatever you thought Christian Kirk was going to do this week, 90% of that's Parker Washington. So not as good, but not that big of a downgrade. I think he's better than people think. And so if you really needed it, especially in 12-team leagues or larger, just, drop Kirk, add Parker, and you're good to go. And then we have Kayshon Boutte. The Patriots, like, they need someone to step up, obviously, at wide receiver. He was vocal this last week, being like, get me more targets, I'm good. Of course, that's every wide receiver. But Polk has been trash. I believe he missed his last game as well with concussion. He should be back the following week. But Polk has been trash. Tyquan Thornton is trash. We knew that going into the season. Osborne, trash. We knew that. Douglas, not trash, but only a slot wide receiver. We still need outside wide receivers. And then Kendrick Bourne, fine, but clearly recovering from the knee injury. Clearly not as good as he was before the injury. I think he's going to need, this season, the off season, into next year to kind of fully get back to his old self. I don't know if the opportunity on New England is there for like a true breakout for Kayshon Boutte, but I have him stashed in Dynasty. I think in deeper formats, like, I feel like there's just a chance that he could do something to close the season. There was a time back in 2020, 2021, that kind of range where he was one of the top wide receiver prospects in all of college football. Like, he was dominant. He had like a 300-yard, 3-touchdown game at LSU. Like, he was really, really good. Then he had these like ankle injuries and he was never really the same after that. He talked about like losing confidence in his health. He was awful in his rookie season. Kind of looks like he's just like starting to figure it out, starting to get going. So at a minimum, keep his name in mind. Even if you have no intention of actually rostering him, keep his name in mind. If you happen to see a Patriots game on Red Zone, watch out for his name, see how you like him. Again, I don't think, even in like 8, 10, 12-team leagues, if you're a championship contender, you're probably not starting Kayshon Boutte, but keep his name in mind at a minimum. At tight end, I'm not kidding when I say Taysom Hill is really all I'm seeing at the tight end position. We've had some pretty solid free agents. Like, actually, for this year, for tight end has been like really, really good. We've got a lot of weeks where there's really strong options that have also hit long-term. This week, all those options are at this point rostered in way too many leagues for me to talk about. So the only option for you is Taysom Hill. And even him, he's someone that like has a ceiling, right? We know Taysom Hill can go out there, have like 2 catches for 40 yards, have like 5 carries and 2 touchdowns, throw a 20-yard pass. Like there's outcomes here where he has like 3 touchdowns in a game. But most weeks he's going to have 5 to 7 touches. Many will come on the ground, so you don't even get the reception bonus in full PPR and half PPR. I don't think I could ever really start him in full PPR. He's not really someone I'm going after, but he's someone that, like, if you've just been decimated at tight end, everyone you pick up has just not worked out. You haven't hit on Auten, you haven't hit on Njoku, Tucker Kraft, guys like that. You haven't been able to trade for anyone, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is a nightmare. And maybe you have like, I don't know, Kittle's on bye this week, right? You have the potential here. I think Kendre Miller also got hurt again somehow. So you've got potential for more goal line touches. Like, there's just an opportunity here for Taysom Hill to score like 15 points this coming week. And so if you had to play him, sure, again, not someone that, like, if you are trying to win a championship, the odds that you do so with Taysom Hill at tight end is slim. Quarterback. Some okay options this week. Bo Nix again. I said last week, I was like, he's projecting extraordinarily well, and I feel like I have to drop this, but then I looked into it and there was really no way to drop it. Like, he was just gonna have a really good game last week. Obviously, accounting for 3 passing touchdowns and a quarterback sneak, he got lucky scoring all of the touchdowns on Denver, but he's the quarterback 9 overall in the season, 15 in points per game. He's the quarterback 5 in points per game over the last 4 weeks. He's averaging over 6 points per game on rushing alone this season. Obviously, again, gets lucky with the goal line sneak. But this week he plays the Ravens. They have an awful pass defense. He's going to drop back a ton. Like, there's a world here where Nick drops back like 40 times this coming week. And I know that's crazy it sounds crazy. Because you're like, it's Bo Nix, like, aren't they going to run the ball? They've been a team that has been high in pass rate over expectation recently. They're a team that has not been that great at running the football, even though historically Sean Payton offenses are. They just haven't been that great at it so far. And they've been in blowouts on like their end. Like, they've been the one destroying teams. I don't think they're going to destroy the Ravens. So if there's a world where they fall behind here, they're already leaning pass heavy, and they play a team where you just can't run on them. You have to throw on them. Like, wheels up. Like, wheels up for the potential for Bo Nix this week. So if you had to stream someone last week and you picked him up, use him again this week. And if you want to go to him this week, I think that's totally fine. I think he's going to project pretty well this week. Matthew Stafford at the Seahawks. Puka and Kupp are back. And we basically said table Stafford until they return, because when his top options are, Tyler Johnson, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, Colby Parkinson, like, what are you expecting, right? Like, what are you expecting for Stafford when it's that and he's not mobile? But when you have Puka and Kupp back and you have Kyron healthy, now he's not a quarterback one, but if you had to stream him, again, at Seattle, not a great spot, not a great matchup. They're still a quality team. But if you had to stream him each week as like a high-end quarterback too, totally fine doing that. And then Jameis Winston versus the Chargers. It's unfortunate, like, we finally have Winston time, but you look at their upcoming schedule and it's so bad. Like, they're versus the Chargers, then they go on bye. After that, they've got versus the Steelers. That's a tough spot. At the Broncos, then at the Steelers, and then versus the Chiefs. Like, that's horrible. And that brings you into week 15 was versus the Chiefs. Like, that brings you into the fantasy playoffs. So he's not, again, I talked about this last week. I'm excited about Winston for the potential of these skill players, because all of the skill players benefit immensely with him at quarterback. But for Jameis himself, the upcoming schedule is so brutal that I don't think you can rely on him as your remaining option for the playoffs. I think it's the second worst, at least with week 7 numbers in mind. I haven't run it for week 8 yet. That'll be tomorrow. But with week 7 numbers in mind, he was the second worst strength of schedule for the playoffs as well, and brutal leading up to the playoffs. Like, it's not looking good for Winston's fantasy value. But skill players, still great having Winston. Then finally, streaming defense. Fine this week, but honestly, like, we're more reliant on the matchups this week. Usually we get a couple where it's like good defense, good matchup, smash spot. This week it's the Saints at the Panthers. I think that's clearly the number one matchup. Even if Dalton was back, which I don't know if he's going to be, but still that'd be a good matchup. Commanders at the Giants, not great, but viable. Bengals versus the Raiders, again, not great, but viable. And then Patriots at the Titans, not great, but viable. Again, I think the first one's best because the Panthers are such a good matchup. I don't even care what defense is going against them, especially with Bryce Young at quarterback. You want to be playing them against the Panthers. But these other 4, not fantastic. It's kind of a tough week. But Commanders have been a lot better as of late, especially against the pass. They're up to 5th in sack percentage. So they're getting after the quarterback, good pass rush, much improved on defense, especially the passing game this season. And then Daniel Jones, if he's not benched by that point, we'll see what he does tonight. But if he's not benched by then, it's a really good matchup against him. Bengals, they're not a good defense, right? They've been pretty bad this season, but the Raiders are prone to many mistakes on offense. The Raiders have now allowed the second most opposing points per game on defense. And then the Patriots defense also fine, but relatively below average. But the Titans, their quarterback, I don't even care who's starting, not going to be great. They've allowed the most points per game to opposing defenses. So as you can tell, pretty mediocre week for the waiver wire, but that's why we've been trying to build a strong bench up to this point, because bye weeks are here. We have a ton of buys coming up. We've got injuries. You're going to need to use your bench. And now at this point of the season, waivers are thin. That's just the reality. It's much less likely that someone is going to break out on free agency without a major injury at this point. So you better have built a decent bench so far. I'll have the rest of season and weekly rankings updated tomorrow, along with the weekly positional reports. That'll be back Wednesday to go over my top trade targets this week. That'll do it for this one, though. Leave a like if you watched this far. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new here, but I'll catch you all on the Wednesday video.